All right, we're going to talk about tZero today. So I first heard about this company when the company that I had worked for for some period of my professional career decided to go public, and they used tZero to issue their stock. So there's a company, Exodus, and Exodus actually used this platform to go public. And there's been some news about it recently. So I thought it'd be a good time to catch up on what's going on with tZero. Lucas, I know you've been looking into this quite a bit. The first thing we should probably talk about is just Patrick Byrne, right? He's the guy that started this thing and was famously the former CEO of Overstock.com.
Yeah, it's that's one of the main things that caught my eye because Patrick Byrne uh, started a fight against naked short selling inside while he was at Overstock.com. Um,
Yeah, he was one of the short targets, so he's been one of many that have been the target of the naked short selling, kind of like what happened with Tesla and GameStop, and yeah, first one that sort of started the big fight was Patrick Byrne of Overstock.
and Patrick Byrne is also on my radar or pops up on my radar all the time. I know that he has a biography that's coming out like maybe this week. Very shortly, which is also done conjointly with Michael Flynn, or somehow General Flynn is associated with it. But Patrick Byrne has had some pretty salacious claims against political corruption in the United States. He has been funding a um, uh, he says that his realization of the extent of the corruption in the financial markets, the stock market in the United States, also led him to become aware of the extent of corruption in the electoral system. So he was actually associated with the Tina Peters case that we've touched upon here at times. But long story short, he has been fighting the fight against naked short selling for quite some time, and he was forced out of Overstock. Did you see when he was forced out? I think it was like 2019. Um,
Yeah, that sounds about right.
yeah, sometime around 2019. But that was on the heels of seeing that many of the problems with naked short selling could be solved by blockchain. And so when he recognized that, he put together a team to create a platform that settled trades on blockchain, and that's what is tZero. So, and he left tZero under the hands of Overstock when he was forced out of that company, and um, and he said that in an inter in a in a I don't know if it was an interview, in a conversation that he had last week, that he said that he doesn't know what's going on with tZero today, but he thought it was ready to hit the market several years ago.
Yeah, well, so this video, I know you found this one on YouTube. This is him 7 years ago talking about what they wanted to do with tZero and blockchain based stock trading. And I think in this video he also talks quite a bit about what they wanted to do with voting. So, and one of the things that struck me about watching this was just how little of this stuff came to pass in the intervening years. I mean, certainly we've seen some amount of stock based trading, and like I said, like this is a good example of what has happened in the intervening years. In 2021, Exodus went live on tZero. I think at this point they were trading exclusively on Algorand, but I think they've expanded since then. But yeah, there's a lot of things he talks about in this video, and it just doesn't seem like much of them came to pass. And the the interviewer referencing here that he recently came on to a show on X with Kevin Malone, who has been watching what's been going on with GameStop quite a bit. And in here, he talks about how he was lied to, about how it was one of his big regrets that he didn't follow through on some of the short selling countermeasures that he had tried to put in place, and that he felt like he had the trump card to beat the short sellers, and it never actually happened, that they were set up to do an NFT or some sort of a token on the blockchain that would have effectively called in all the short positions, but that he never actually got a chance to do it.
In that talk that he gave in Aspen 7 years ago, after he sort of lays out the vision for tZero, one of the first questions that somebody asks him is, "Do you have a good bodyguard?" And he laughs it off in that interview, but you can see that the very powerful interests were threatened by the creation of tZero, and I think that's probably a lot of the kickback that he was getting from Overstock was with regards to the upset of the status quo that was coming with the introduction of closing the settlement window. So yeah, he seemed naive in Aspen 7 years ago, but angry, still angry about some of the things that had happened at Overstock in the discussion that he had with Kevin Malone. So
but now tZero, it seems like, has been progressing, and they've had recent news. So there's some particular announcements that have happened where tZero has gotten some regulatory approvals, and I believe they just got acquired by wholesale by ICE. Is that right too? I think that's the other thing I was reading. I was trying to dredge up an actual link to exactly what's going on there, but I believe tZero has been acquired, and that this is now going to get integrated into the New York Stock Exchange.
yes, that was the news that broke last week. I'm not sure which day, but that tZero had been acquired by ICE and was partnering with the New York Stock Exchange. So it's finally coming around, and which I think also speaks to, Patrick Byrne in his discussion with Kevin Malone vilifies some of the players who engage in corruption in the current market ecosystem. But I think, like, again, going back to what we heard from Ken Griffin, CEO of Citadel, in the wake of the Roaring Kitty GameStop squeeze in 2020, in that hearing with the House, it was apparent, I think, to many at that point that that closing the settlement window was inevitable. So I would imagine that we're going to see. Well, I don't imagine. We've already seen Citadel and BlackRock make their announcement with regards to starting a stock exchange in Texas, in Dallas, Texas, maybe Fort Worth, that is going to be settled on blockchain, and that should, we should understand that as also putting a great deal of pressure on existing stock exchanges to also close their settlement windows. So I was not surprised to see this announcement with the New York Stock Exchange. I imagine we'll see the NASDAQ and other stock exchanges closing their settlement windows also.
Well, yeah, and tZero is not the only player in this space. So another one that, as we started to research what was going on here and to look into it a bit deeper, securitize.io is another one that's doing this same kind of a thing. So it seems like there's quite the rush into this space over the last 5 to 10 years, that there have been a variety of different players that are trying to get in here and get a piece of this action. I think you're absolutely right. We used to see T2, you had 2 days to settle. Then that got closed to T1. And so this move towards blockchain is probably reducing it as low as you can possibly get. Obviously, can't have instantaneous settlement, but at the speed of the blockchain, which is much faster than anything we've seen. And I think, hearing some of the top brass at Chia talk about this as well, there's appetite for this kind of stock settlement and bringing stuff to market. So there's definitely a few players that are lining up to do this, and that at least tZero and Securitize seem to have been making some inroads.
I Securitize, some of the funding that came for Securitize came first with Morgan Stanley, and Blockchain Capital. I didn't get a chance to see who was behind Blockchain Capital. But I saw that and I believe that was in 2021. I saw that in 2024, BlackRock invested in it. So BlackRock is playing the game not by picking one horse, but it seems like they're picking several horses to be. I think a lot of people have some sort of notion that like the Google or the Apple or the Microsoft emerges immediately, but players with deep pockets are going to be selecting a number of horses early in the race to maximize their exposure. So and I think that we will also see the same with blockchains. tZero, tZero, which blockchains is tZero settling on? Because it wasn't just Algorand.
Yeah, I think it's Algorand, Tezos, and Ethereum. I think I actually got that pulled up.
And just thinking from,
yeah, it's right. It's documented right here. So it's like, here's their blockchain token standards.
Yeah. So, and you can imagine that as they are thinking about the details of what sort of products to offer to consumers, that they will be thinking about consumers as far as companies that are looking to use blockchain for their settlement and the transfer of their stocks, to offer them different blockchains to use. And I would imagine that we're also going to see, from the vantage of Citadel or market makers, that we are going to see different windows of settlement time that are offered. So I expect there to be, the highest category will be shorter time windows, maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. But then a probably cheaper options extending from there to a couple, for 4 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, 15 hours, something like that. So I imagine that's what is going to occur in the world of settlement coming forward. And
I think one of the companies that we've been able to watch that's sort of swimming through all of this stuff is Exodus. Like, and they have news that's happening this week where they're actually going to be on New York Stock Exchange. So it all seems to be somewhat tied together in this stuff happening in coordinated fashion. Although Exodus leaving tZero and then maybe coming back through the New York Stock Exchange is kind of an interesting round trip.
yeah, also Patrick Byrne, in his conversation with Malone and in the Aspen talks about issues that he's having with the SEC, and so I think that's also part of this story. We are seeing changes in the leadership of the commissioners at the SEC. We're seeing a new era of just a new era with the Trump administration, especially with regards to adoption and attitudes towards blockchain, towards crypto. So they're making a lot of noise about strategic Bitcoin reserve right now, but I think what's going to have an equal or larger impact is the use of blockchain for the likes of tZero settlements.
Yeah, real world asset tokenization. This is something that we've been hearing the big players talk about. It seems like things are all poised to go super mainstream in 2025. We've got a lot of different um, groups, individuals, companies that are working on this kind of stuff. So I definitely think that we're going to see a big uptick in this with the change in leadership at the SEC. Although it seems like tZero's already dotted all those I's and crossed all those T's. If you look at some of the announcements they've got, they just keep having this unending stream of press releases related to all their regulatory approvals. It's kind of interesting to watch all that happen. It's been rapid fire over the last 2 weeks.
Well, rapid fire after an indeterminable amount of stalling that was going on during the Biden administration. We've seen also with the revelations of the Treasury Department and senators like Elizabeth Warren applying pressure to banks to debank players in the blockchain sector. So that was quite easily applied in the SEC. So things that didn't make sense in in bureaucratic questions and concerns that have been going on for not just the last 3 years, but probably the last 7 or 10 or probably since 1995, are now magically resolved. I mentioned also I mentioned the varied windows that we're probably going to see, and you said the tokenization of real world assets. There are two players here that I think I think it's important to bring up those aspects because um, a world in which in which an entity with say the power of Citadel and the power of BlackRock magically disappearing isn't feasible. But you can see those companies having some sort of business model going forward if there is um, if there's diversity in those options. And so maybe Citadel's not excited about the smaller window. Maybe they are because the because maybe they are because it will reduce their competition, and they're already the largest bully in the ring when it comes to um, deals during the settlement window. I think BlackRock is also going to be very excited about. I mean, Larry Fink talks all the time about tokenization of real world assets. Um, they He understands the benefit that BlackRock brings in rebundling and building financial products on top of a diversity of financial assets or tokenized assets as being a plus. And I think they actually believe that. If if they do believe that that brings stability, then you could also see them being excited about being able to put that in the hands of more customers. And I think when it comes to the bureaucratic roadblocks that are thrown up by the SEC, that we might understand that as coming from um, maybe large investment banks who are representing investors who wanted to keep that world walled off uh, from everyday people.
It was interesting to hear Patrick Byrne talk about how the financial institutions that were involved in certain types of securities lending, how much of their revenue came from that. Like the YouTube video that we're talking about, just like has a pretty fascinating insight into that from somebody who was, in the trenches, and the contrast between the two, to hear sort of the excitement and the promise of what Patrick Byrne thought he could pull off 7 years ago, and then to hear him sort of retrospecting on it on his recent interview with Kevin Malone of Malone Wealth. That's it's a stark contrast to hear sort of what he thought he could accomplish, and then sort of looking back and his regrets, or sort of things that didn't go well, and how he wished it had happened differently, and also just the insights that he's got from having fought the naked short selling of Overstock.com. I just thought it was a fascinating thing to compare.
Well, and the number that he throws out is like 75%. So we could quibble as to whether it's a little bit less than that, but even at 60, 70, whatever, it's a monstrous number. And if we understand that that's where money is being made, where infinite money piles or money holes exist, um, you know, this is part of the story of the $1 trillion of debt that I believe it took us 105 days this year to accumulate $1 trillion of debt. Well, part of the story of how that can be a reality is a world in which financial instruments are piled one atop each other, and there's a couple of winners. So I think this also begins to give us cause for concern when we think about what the narrative is about both the strength of the American dollar, but also the strength of the United States economy. If our gross domestic product is how perversely or quickly we can pass money around, and our actual product is interest that goes towards a couple of investors that exist in the world, then it's not a great system. So and we can also begin to understand this cannibalization of all these companies that exist in America, in the world. The GMEs, um, uh, General Mills restaurants, sort of everything that comes to mind, Bed Bath and Beyond, et cetera, et cetera. Toys R Us. Why does it make sense for a group of people to get together and borrow a lot of money in an inflationary economy, or in a with the inflation of the dollar, and turn around and buy companies and break them apart and sell them for parts? Well, I think it has a lot to do with this 75 with this enormous number of money that's being made for the selling of stocks, the trading of stocks, and not actual realization of what product they were creating.
The other fascinating part of all of this, listening to Patrick Byrne talk about this, was when he mentioned his journey to China and talking with the people who were working on settlement, and he asked them, how often do you have fail to delivers, and how often does this occur? And them repeatedly telling him that they don't have that kind of problem, because anybody that causes that kind of problem gets a bullet to the back of the head. That's pretty shocking.
Well, I don't know. Oh, absolutely. It brought to mind, I mean, just recently, an executive for, I believe, the Bank of China, and I'm talking like in the last couple of weeks, was either executed or evicted from the country after getting a death sentence for some sort of corruption that he was implicated in. So I wasn't surprised at his understanding of that at all. This we have a lot of narratives about how things work in China, the lack of the private sector, but um, what when their businesses are also seen part of the state, cheating the state has a different tune to it than joining in down at the docks with a bunch of pirates and stealing money from another pirate.
Yeah, this is like stealing money from the king. Like you're stealing money from the state, from the CCP. The CCP doesn't take that kindly, and they're in control of the force.
Yep. And I, this also sort of brings up thoughts about the narrative or what we see in the United States with regards to the killing of the United Health Group CEO. We've seen shock that there's gambling, shock that the American public is I don't know what word to use here, is that the American public has not been more scandalized by the assassination of that CEO, but we also I I don't know what to say here. We also live in a world in which we've
Is what you're thinking here that you'd expect to see less of the galvanization of the general populace around this CEO being killed? Because pretty much the sentiment that I've seen is he was inflicted a significant amount of pain and suffering upon the U.S. populace, and so the U.S. populace doesn't seem to have a lot of sympathy for him. That seems to be resoundingly what gets repeated.
I mean, what shocked me, well, not what shocked me, I'm not so surprised at all. But you see other CEOs, Elon Musk, in the wake of that assassination, Elon Musk said, what was he doing wrong? He has a fiduciary duty to maximize profits.
Yeah, and I guess that right there is the thing that everybody's got to seriously think about in this world. It's like that is the duty of the CEO. That's not their job to be merciful or to try to do the right thing. It's to maximize shareholder value, and I mean, just speaks to a hole in the system, I think, because if this is what is valued by society, and by that I mean where we put our wealth, that there's trouble a brewing.
There is trouble a brewing, and this is why we are coming to a realization and incorporating into the discourse, the public discourse, a remembrance that what when we say a corporation, that's because it's incorporated. What is it incorporated to? It's incorporated into the tax code. It's incorporated into the accounting system of the public sector. Like there are these notions that the private sector is a world apart from the public sector. No, it's a piece that's inserted, that's carved out of the public sector. And this line that that the private sector has one goal, and that's to maximize profits for the shareholders. We're going to have corporations that necessarily begin to understand that that they've also got to continue to provide the public the benefit to the public sector that gives them the reason for being carved out to begin with. And I think it's like, to go back to Elon Musk, he also begins to understand that he has moved the incorporation of Tesla from Delaware to Texas. And when he moves that incorporation from a tiny state that none of the C-suite lives in and none of the workers live in and no production occurs in, to Texas, I think he's going to find that those people who participate in, especially the production of it, of that company, are going to there's going to be a faster feedback as to what is right and what is wrong in the operations of the business.
It sure seems weird that that even is the way things are set up. Don't you think that like some tiny state, Delaware, somehow attracts all of these corporate filings, yet the businesses really don't have anything to do there other than being rooted there as a legal entity? And then to see that when you have an incorporation that occurs in Delaware, that there's this oversight. You know, the thing that's famously been happening here is the fight between Elon Musk and the judge who said his compensation package was not correct. He shouldn't get this billions of dollars worth of stock that he thought would be, you know, adequate compensation. At the time, it seemed like a very outsized bet. Like no one really thought he was going to pull it off, and so to ex post facto come in here and start adjudicating this, it seems like you know, it's an interesting way that the system is set up for sure.
Well, the judge is also making a decision based on complaints by some of the shareholders of Tesla. So uh, I don't know, but going to this strange system where we have one state that all of the corporations um, of the country incorporate into. Um, what Delaware is doing is robbing from the other states of the union, and it doesn't make sense. It makes a little sense if we go back into history and we think about um, the legacy or the how the system grew out of um, the states having the original sort of the power over what was incorporated, what was part of the private sector that existed inside of them, and how that system was changed, especially with the popular election of the senators. But we used to have a system in which I think we also should understand that the state governments were pitted against each other in providing in creating a good environment in the private sector. So they were pitted against each other, and they were pitted against the federal government. And whenever we begin to change the structure to privilege businesses that were operating or corporations that were operating across state lines, um, we lost some of the protection of having governments work against each other, and that's whenever we saw a rise of these private unions. But private unions have not been private unions are ill equipped to be able um, to make the working environment better for laborers, for workers. So um, I think we need I think it's a good idea to have not just one government, like to expect one government to protect citizens, but to expect layers of government to argue amongst themselves and for citizens to win out in that fight. Um, but yeah, let's also think back to the dock workers strike. How long did that last?
Was that like 2 weeks or something? Not
Yeah,
long. That
yeah,
was
and the leadership got bought off. Um, I mean, I forget all the details, but I remember whenever it was happening, I said, "Sounds like a lot of noise. I bet not that much changed," and not much changed.
well, with the move towards some of this stuff getting more integrated into the mainstream, and blockchain-based settlement seeming to be something that we should expect to see pretty much becoming the norm in 2025. It'll be interesting to see how all of this naked short selling actually gets reined in, because I think a lot of issuance of securities and not delivering them when they're being sold short should start to come to an end if these things all come about the way that it seems like everything's lining up. So I think as we look towards 2025, if people are looking for a different way that the stock market's going to behave, this is probably going to be the year that it happens.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to it. We've had the the technology has existed for some time now, but there needed to be a growing acceptance, a growing pushback against the corruption in the current system. I think it's come to a head. Bravo to the communities of GameStop, to Patrick Byrne, as complicated figure that he is. Bravo to the dissidents who have tried to change us to a more I don't know, a more open, a more public, a fairer system. So I'm looking forward to see what happens. Still looking forward to see, who Chia's partner is announced to be. But this was certainly a fascinating development to come onto the radar last week, and we'll keep an eye on tZero too. So that's all I've got today, Grant. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add.
No, I think that's it. So yeah, fascinating look into what's going on with stocks and securitization, real world assets. Yeah, we'll check you tomorrow on FOMO.